Back to one of your favorite subjects. I know it's not mine. Electricity. Well, you know by now we got the world is full of, all the way from Catholics and Protestants and Jews and other people trying to take lessons from life. You see them out on the front of their buildings. But they try to take it from events. And all these stories about some drunk came to see me or some person told me in the congregation. We've got to raise the level of that kind of allegory and metaphor to a higher level. There's no reason that I'm into electricity now. At least it's not personal. All right, here it is. There is a relationship that just springs once I point it out to him, having to do with the circuitry of man in relationship to us being in the body of life. Is related to a fairly well known, I assume if I know it, little dictum about the great world of electricity. And it is that ordinarily an electrical current is ultimately going to convert electricity into some other form of energy. If it does not, you have what amounts to a short circuit. The most common forms, this is my opinion, but that's my favorite one. I guess the most common ones would be to turn them into, that is to turn the electricity into light, heat, or motion. That's surely the most common ones, like to turn the electrical current at the end of it into, such as a light bulb. To turn the electricity into, to convert it into another form. Or like for a waffle iron into heat. And then into your washing machine and other assorted gadgets to run a motor. Can anyone see any connection between this and how about my good old thinking of action, or even thinking of motion? And how about feeling of motion, and then motion, of course, itself? I don't bring this up just because it fits, because within the body of life at the 3D level, I've never put it to you this way, but some of you should already have been pondering and smelling around the edge of it. At least at the 3D level, we can, with some correctness and with a great deal of potential profit, speak about man as apparently being the ultimate. It is like, let me throw it in, since all of you enjoyed some months back, when I drew out the audio chain. If you remember, like from a stereo record or a CD, all the way into the speaker. In a sense, if you never thought about it, you don't have to be electrically inclined. But an amplifier putting out the sound that comes out of your speaker at home or in your car, if were it not for the speaker, you would have almost a short circuit. That you've got to have a tail end to turn the circuit, to turn the electricity finally into another form. In that same sense, there is a chain going on, and man at the 3D level appears to be, to use the audio metaphor for a second, the speaker. That you are apparently the tail end, that you are apparently the cutoff. You are apparently that which keeps energy in the body of life from turning into a short circuit. Think about it a second. Now let's jump back to the original, change the metaphor back to literally that general dictum that an electrical current, if it's not just simply going to short circuit, and if you don't like that, I'm not going into even my understanding of what they are inferring about a short circuit, or there being no ultimate conversion. How about just a complete waste of time? A breakdown of the energy, a waste of the energy, if there is not an ultimate conversion. The general dictum of an electrical current has got to ultimately be converted into another form of energy. The three most common ones I pointed out can be seen to have a metaphorical connection. That if you saw light, you could think of it almost as the ultimate in the upper circuit. The thinking that the energy of life that comes through man, that one of the possibilities, one of the ultimate conversions of the energy, the necessary conversion for it not to short circuit, that one of the possibilities in man, in you individually, the energy comes through and it produces a form of light. That is, it produces thinking of motion, thinking of action. Or it comes out as heat. And I could draw you, I believe, a parallel between that and my blue circuits, that which people think of as being human emotion, heat, a feeling of action, of motion. And then at the lower circuits, in my good old red circuits, you would have simply motion itself, that the energy flowing through man, in the body of life and coming through man, if it is not going to short circuit, if it's not ultimately going to be wasted, it has got to be right at the very end, the same way as sound. You can put your little ear down to a CD player and you can't hear anything. You can put it down to at least a good solid state amplifier, a preamp, and you can't hear anything. You can even get to the back of your amp. Don't hurt yourself, for where it says output. It's got the little output jacks. You can put your ear right there and you won't hear anything. It has got to ultimately be converted into another form. You have got to hook a speaker up to it. You have got to, in a certain line, in a certain flow of energy, in a certain chain, not an audio chain necessarily, it's not limited to that, but in a certain chain embodied in the body of life, you have got to hook up man. He is the speaker. He is the end of that current. Now generally, let me give you a more overall push toward these three together. The general flow of energy that's coming through man as observed at the 3D level. It is not limited to this, but that's all we can talk about in words profitably. The general description of the manifestation that man makes is being the end of a particular chain. Being the end, being the place where energy, some form coming from the primal flow is coming through man, and if it's not going to short circuit, it has to be converted into something else. Now, rather than just speak of light, heat, and motion, or for me to speak of thinking of action, thinking of motion, or feeling of motion, or motion itself, let me give you a wider description. How is it that man seems to, in general, wider terminology, to convert ultimately this energy? Believe it or not, I'll divide it up into three general categories. The first one being talk. The second one being a quick and rather drastic, not rather, say quick and drastic manipulation of the material environment. The third one is this peculiar mortal version of the pecking order within the human pack. Now, believe it or not, there is a connection, whether I'm going to point it out or not, between those three general descriptions and those three. The energy comes out. The energy is flowing through you, and there is some need for it. Just moment by moment, you would be hard-pressed, and even if you could pursue this, it'd be, by and large, a waste of energy. It'd be a bad bargain, but constantly, energy is flowing through you for some purpose. You're still alive for some purpose. Now, on a wider scale that has nothing to do with pessimism, you may eventually acquire some view that you personally are rather insignificant. You might acquire a wider view that may start approaching another dimension, that you realize that I'm not just insignificant because of who I am personally. Hell, everybody's insignificant. Except at the 3D level, it would appear that a president, a prime minister, a religious leader, a billionaire could be of more significance than you are. And I don't mean socially or culturally, but you might think, well, life is using that person more. If you're alive, life is using you. Moment by moment, apparently, the energy rang to you, and there you sit at home, half consumed by temporary ennui, staring out the window, doing nothing, wondering what to do next. And at that moment, if all this came back to you, you might contemplate, well, how important is the conversion that I'm making of life's energy right now? And it might appear to be, at the very least, minimal. But at least life has kept you alive. You are serving some. It may be Pogita. It may be real teeny-weeny. But if life has kept you alive, you are serving some purpose. You can always look at it that way. But to expand from apparently the moment by moment, oftentimes questionable from your view, your self-view, of what am I converting life's energy into and for what reason, to go past just this kind of minimal sitting around staring out the window scenario, is that the other times that I was generally classifying to you, you are apparently on the verge of either being actively involved with another transmitter, read human, or you are planning, or you are feeling how it will be to pursue these plans, these thinking of action. But the three areas I point out, what I want you to understand that I didn't say the first time around, is those three are absolutely unique. Nothing at the 3D level, that is nothing that you can observe, nothing of which you can be aware under ordinary circumstances, no other creature, no other entity can serve these purposes. The energy flows through beavers, trees, streams, the clouds, mountains, the atomic level. But at the 3D observation platform, only man takes this energy and turns it sometimes into talk. Now talk, in some circles, I understand, from my casual reading that I did back in the late 50s, in some areas has a bad rap. If people talk too much, and some people believe that you'd be more spiritual if you didn't talk even at all. And a lot of parents tell kids, shut up. And even Freud, trying to make his reputation back there at the turn of the century, when he found out that all the other physicians, before there was psychiatry, there he was with his MD and couldn't get any work. But he found out that there were people who were making a living curing, as they called it back then in quotation marks, hysterical women. For some reason that was a fad then. But just look, a whole area, a whole business now sprang up on the basis that he took these hysterical women and said, hey, I'll talk to them. And other people were trying to hypnotize them and run electricity through them, give them drugs, make them sniff cocaine. Of course, somebody did point, I think it was Kyrut told me one time, of how different history would have been that if the first few times he was confronted by these, quote, hysterical women, which, you know, imagine it's turn of the century in Vienna and the kind of clothes they had to wear, and they didn't believe that women enjoyed sex, and damn if I don't think you and I'd be hysterical. But anyway, imagine if, when he decided to undertake to make his own reputation, write up a few papers and get some business, he undertook the treatment of, quote, hysterical women. What if, like his first one comes in, her husband or somebody says yes, she classifies, or another physician sent her over, refer to, she is definitely an hysterical woman. What if, just a fluke of history, instead of him having handed there at his desk, he reached down, didn't know what to do, probably being nervous, being in the midst the first time of a hysterical woman. Instead of there being a pad and a pencil, and him sitting down and talking and started, therapy, what if instead he reached down and there'd been a pistol? Is what I keep thinking about. And she started, and he just pistol whipped her. Shut up, you hysterical bitch. I just often thought where psychiatry could have gone. So I might have had more faith in it. Think of all the empty beds we'd have in psychiatric wards. If you get upset, you just go in and see a psychiatrist, and you just as soon as you start to say something about, you don't know the way my mother treated me. He just takes out a pistol out of his pocket and just pistol whips you across the head. And you'd have to say, hey, I feel a lot better now. It seems to have a kind of clearing effect on my mind. I don't know. It is truly one of these singular. You've got to see this rather than that was just a little example to throw in about how I guess some people look at talk as being useless, and it's not, of course. That one of the areas to get the conversion of life's energy through man is talk. Now, regardless of things that I may have said and things that you picked up, you do need to see that that is one of the primary functions, the conversion functions of life's energy. Just because at line level consciousness that you could look upon, you're sitting in a restaurant and listening to people babble. That is your opinion. People just talking about useless stuff. Staying in a bar listening to red circuit people. Carry on and almost get in fights discussing hockey. From your view, or religion, politics, from your view, you can consider this is not only useless, at times this becomes provocative. People get in fights. People shoot each other, so I read in the paper, over arguing over basketball. That something should be done about loose lips. Just mechanical babble. And you're wrong. That is one of the primary functions, that is one of the uses of humans being at the end of a particular chain in the energy flow, is to convert that energy into talk, period. We're not discussing the quantitative idea of talk, or whether some is better than others. Just part of the purpose is for it to turn it into talk, or there would be a short circuit. The other one that I mentioned, the second one was, I don't think many of you caught it the first time around, it is man doing I said quick, and what I meant was like in your lifetime, like an almost instant. In the, I guess, dictionary's second definition, that is a present. That your generation, you, some group of people, manipulate the environment. That we have changed the environment, that we're inside now, we have electrical lights, we have air conditioning, etc. That is one of the general purposes of man. That no other animal does, no other creature does, no mountain does, no entity of which you can be 3D aware affects its environment. Now, of course, all of you should be aware that parts of life's body, it always makes it interesting, continues to criticize other parts of life's body for the way it's doing this. You're polluting the planet. There are even those that say, hey, we were better off when we didn't have electricity. Because think about it, before we had electricity, had you ever heard of juvenile delinquency? No. Before air conditioning, had you ever even heard of LSD? There you are. But there is a general area you should be able to see this. Of course, my inference, as you know by now, at the very least of that is that that's part of life's own internal conflict, and you're making a mistake to let your own consciousness, your own awareness, find favor with either side of that kind of binary argument. That is, that we're going uphill or downhill, or that we've got too much technology or we don't have enough. There is no answer between that. But part of the purpose, part of the conversion of life's primal flow, of the energy that's ending up with man being in a particular chain of this, of man being the final, the speaker, him being the part that converts it and stops that particular circuit from short-circuiting. That part of the conversion is in the apparent manipulation of the literal environment, of him changing what seems to be out there. Again, singular. Nothing else. And forget any idea about right or wrong. The third one, that even less of you showed any response to, is it is the peculiar, and by that I really mean not only unique, but kind of funny unique, of what seems to be the mortal version of the pecking order, what seems to be the human variation of the all-inclusive that's here on the planet outside of man, of the dominant submissive structure. That man plays this, or builds this structure, man engages in this dominant / submissive dance, again, in a singular fashion. And that is part of his conversion of the energy. Now, since I don't see hardly anyone even reacting to that. I guess what ordinary people would simply call the run-of-the-mill, everyday affair of human intercourse. The apparent social life of humanity. All the way from the fact that humans will apparently, under certain conditions, give their life for another human. And under other conditions, humans will turn around and take somebody's life, and somebody say, "Why'd you do it?" They go, "What?" No. Apparently it has no significance. Now that about covers a 3D spectrum, but that is the peculiar relationship between the dominant submissive structure, and it too has its share of critics. As you should know, throughout history there's been parts of life's body pointing at other parts of life's body saying, "You people are heathens, you're infidels, you're nuts, you're uncivilized, we should stamp out at least half of you people over there. Us half, we see that you half are not doing right." That is singular in man. That there is a condemnation of some other group of the same species. Crows do not find fault with hummingbirds. Don't have to go much further. Badgers do not go up to beavers and go, "Ew." Lions do not, I assume, put on airs when they're hanging around bobcats. There is no, and this is not self-evident, I mean much more than I'm saying, so don't just pass it off as me being funny. There is no social order outside of man. There is no fighting for position on any level outside the literal food chain. That one species, or inside the same species, if it is not a fight over who's going to dine and who's going to be dinner, there is no struggle. Not like with man. There is the struggle for the ordinary dominance in the pack, but man's is peculiar in that it is not limited to what would appear to be physical prowess of who's the strongest, who's the fastest. With man, you don't need that. In some particular area, you can look over and find what seems to be, or who seems to be, the predominating force, who seems to be the dominant force in this situation. And it'll turn out to be an 82-year-old woman with arthritis in a wheelchair with $40 million or $40 billion, and she is leading, and there's this whole village, thousands of people, a factory, a town, And 14,000 people all gather around her, and in a sense, they all dance backwards. It can happen, at least any of you have voices in you that think that the money represents something else. It can happen outside money. What do you call being a fan? What do you call having a hero? What do you call it inside of your circle? Let's talk about other people so that you don't have to feel bad. What do you call it that people go, ooh, John Wayne, I've got his picture at home, or Elvis? And there can be circuits in you, that once I bring it up, that can laugh. People that got pictures of Elvis all over their house. Got them up next to their nice photograph or painting of Jesus. Not many people have photographs of Jesus anymore. That is part of the peculiar. There's no need to be critical. If you feel critical toward it, remember it was a test, and now you're dumber than they are if you think that's funny. But the idea, the feeling that there are people who are heroes, and they don't have to have money. Forget whether Elvis or John Wayne had money. It just strikes people. Or the Jesuses and the Buddhas. It is a peculiar wiring. It is a peculiar manifestation of life's energy coming out in man, not only with talk, not only with apparently changing the environment, but this peculiar spectrum of behavior that is not a fight between people over food, or it's not limited to that anymore. It's not simply a fight over, all right, I'm in charge of this pack, and you young whippersnappers are going to have to whip my ass to take over my women, to take over my position. It's no longer just that. Because all of that is always dependent upon action itself, dependent upon red circuit prowess in some form. The peculiar dance going on in the human pack, in the human pecking order, are things that cannot be weighed, muscles that cannot be measured, and even that which does not seem to be limited to animalistic charisma. It is a peculiar conversion of energy, and it is very, very necessary. But notice how open it is, like the other two, to criticism. That parts of life's body tells other parts of life's body, you talk too much, you talk about things you don't know about, you talk too loud, you talk too soft, you are changing the environment, but is it all for the best? Look at things you tried to do and look at the byproducts. That. And then trying to attack humans for having heroes. Trying to attack humans for such things as humans fight too much. Humans are the only species that kill their own kind, which humans, some parts of life's bodies had humans saying that almost since they've been talking, which is not necessarily true, but it's on the basis as a reflection of parts of life's body finding fault with the other parts of life's body completing an energy, an electrical circuit as it were, that the ultimate conversion on the human level is it comes out as a kind of peculiar, that is a kind of singular manifestation of the dominant, submissive dance that does not limit itself, is not limited to physical combat. And there are parts of life's body that find fault with that. But I want you, what I'm trying to get you to perceive and remember and to find on your own, all three of these. You engage in all three, humanity engages in all three, and all such manifestations are necessary. They are serving a purpose, no matter how short-lived at the time, to keep some particular flow of energy, as it were, to keep some electrical current from grounding out, from short-circuiting. Because an electrical current cannot run forever. It will short-circuit. It has got to be converted into something else, another form of energy. The energy that other people have talked about forever. They have talked about it as being man's soul, as man's spirit. And you notice all my diagrams, everything from me drawing humans as factories, to the nervous system, to all the interrelated circles of my circuits. Please note, I have never pointed out one place, I've never even hinted that I knew where man's soul or where man's spirit was. There is the energy flowing in man. Is why, of course, I'm not making fun of it any more than I make fun of anything. It is a misinterpretation. It is flawed information, parts of life's body, coming out with these ideas that there is something other than what we can dissect, what an autopsy will show. That there's got to be man's spirit, his eternal soul, the spark of life, the spark of the gods. It is the energy that is flowing through you, and it all is serving a purpose. Although some parts of life's body, the person next to you thinks you talk too much. The person next to you says that you pollute the environment by continuing to throw cigarettes and gum wrappers out your car window. But you do that internally. You do that to yourself. But whatever is going on within those three categories, which covers them all if you didn't notice, is serving an absolute necessary function. That the energy that is life, the energy that is you, the energy that is man, the energy that life is using for a purpose through man, if it is not, when it hits you, converted into something else, you have a matter of a short circuit. It has got to be converted, and anything that fits into those three categories is a proper conversion. Of course, as always, that's a trick. Don't go off and try where you can if you want to, and to find something that doesn't fit, because it does fit. So the point is, all human behavior, no matter how short-lived, is at least serving the purpose to keep a short circuit from occurring. No matter how dumb, no matter how irrelevant, no matter how ephemeral may appear to be, let us say, what you say under some given condition. And later people will make this comment amongst themselves. In private, they will say, I've got to watch my tongue. I got in public and I get a little flustered if people start discussing politics or Middle Ages Italian lit, and I'm so dumb, but sometimes I'll try to join in and I'll say something real stupid like I did. You know, like that I was thinking that Dante lived in the 1700s. You know, I got to stop that. You know, that's not the point. The point is, if it was you sitting there in some conversation, sitting around a coffee shop with some other people, and you make some comment that leads one or two people to believe that you think Dante was alive somewhere around the American Revolution, perhaps, and several of them look at you, at that time, the energy flowing through you was going to short circuit. Does it give you some hint at the ordinary level? This is no excuse, of course, for revolutionists doing it, but of why people do things and then later say, I shouldn't have done it, or I'll do shit like that. And even as I was about to talk, I realized, I don't even know Dante. I just barely remember something about he wrote some kind of long poem that bored me. But it was like, well, they were already talking about Italian, I thought they said something about Middle Age. I'm not even sure what it meant. At any rate, I guess I suspected I didn't know what I was saying, but I couldn't help myself. And of course people attribute that to all kinds of childhood traumas, or my mother wasn't paying attention to me, and now I get out into conditions and people talking about stuff, and I guess it's my poor self-image, and I'm trying to strike back at my Uncle Charlie that used to kick me in the shins, and so now I'm inclined subconsciously, obviously, that I'm motivated to talk about things I don't know about, and I want to get caught at it. Obviously it's unconscious desire for people to laugh at me. All right, you know, all that nowadays, if you buy that, you know, since Freud did have a pen and paper instead of a pistol, if you buy that story, then it fits. But what I'm pointing out to you is, beyond all that, carrying it closer to the reality of the nature of energy, is it's true that people have a passing sensation many times that I'm about to open my mouth, and you're already going, and like I don't know what I'm talking about. But the energy was in you, and it was going to short circuit. And it came out as talk. It could have come out another way. I'm going to leave the other two possibilities, but whatever's going on, it served at least this purpose. That is, you making a fool of yourself verbally, you or anybody, at least it stopped one little chain of energy from short-circuiting, because it did convert it into another form of energy, as it must. Let those who believe in fatalism, where are all the Calvinists when I need them? Could I charge them extra and let them leave the Baptist church? give them a new definition of being predestined. I just take them aside and say, pay me a big sum of money. And I say, all right, join up with me instead of the Baptists. Leave them. Not only can you drink and enjoy it, which is a key thing with the Baptists, but I'm going to tell you the secret. And the secret is, don't worry about that. The gods somewhere have got certain people predestined to make it and some not. As soon as I get his money or whatever, then I say, everybody's predestined. See if that helps. The predestination is this, that you are going to convert the energy that is life in man. You are going to convert it into another form of energy. That is what you are here for. Talking dumb, trying to put on airs, trying to act like you're better than other people, apparently manipulating the environment, which includes many things, not just throwing gum wrappers out the window. But all of those, no matter that you may have some opinion in you that part of your partnership may say, you're on the wrong track, you're pretentious, you keep making a fool out of yourself, you shouldn't do it. You see what a waste of time that is if you take that noise personally, because that's also the energy converting itself. All of the ideas of people doing things that are silly, wasteful, unprofitable, all the ordinary concepts and ideas of that, from a higher view, are misnomers. You notice that any of you I've got to ever lecture on that, to preach on that I've always, to try and stay within the realm of correctness, I always got to say from another level, because at the same level there is no such thing as incorrectness. Which of course is again part of the great coup de maître, that at the level at which anything is operating, given its ordinary view, as you'd call it consciousness, there is nothing incorrect. There are no false steps. Speaking of the audio chain, before I go on, would any of you find this interesting? You don't have to be experts, but you understand. If you got some source, your radio, your tuner, or you put on a record, and it goes into your amplifier to take those little teeny-weeny microvolts that come out of the cartridge where your little needle is, your stylus, and then it has to amplify them. And as I said, of course, you can't put your ear up to the back end of an amplifier and hear anything. And then you got to run a wire to a speaker. That seems to be the ultimate purpose of the audio chain. If you don't have a speaker, you got nothing. That the purpose, apparently, of the audio chain will never be served without a speaker, which in a sense is converting. Well, not just in a sense, I don't mean it literally, is converting electricity into sound pressure, sound waves, heat, among other things, which I was going to point out, whether any of you are interested. I keep reading throughout my life that amplifiers, that is the last part that's putting out the sound going into your speaker, the next to last, and the speaker being the ultimate. And look at the speaker like man in another chain. But the part that I thought some of you might find interesting is I keep reading over and over the figure of 95%. That is, that 95% of an amplifier's power is expended in heat, not sound. So that the apparent, think about it, the apparent purpose of the audio chain, of the amplifier even being there in the chain, is to make sound, and the whole purpose of the speaker. But the best the speaker is doing is what you hear, what seems to be the final outcome, is 5% is the, do you follow me, of the conversion of what was the 100% of the electrical energy, the electrical current going into the amplifier. I was going to drop this paragraph and go on. Sometime like on a weekend, or when you just got a little while, why don't you try and remember that, and to see if it suddenly strikes you that there could be any kind of significance, any kind of connection between that fact and humans, that you're the final outcome in one link. Are you operating at what amounts to 5% efficiency? Is it possible you could get a closer view of humanity and think about that after you want to see it, and then look around at a speaker and think this operating at 5%, and then perhaps go on your knees and pray to it? Like, that a speaker might be your superior? I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to make you feel bad. But if it's operating at least with a 5%, who knows? If you look around at yourself, it might be that you might want to start a great Bose or JBL religion and pray to your speakers. Let us turn the tape over before I... All right. Oh, that was a warm-up. I've been warming up to this for some number of months, sort of. So are you ready? It's like extraordinary topographical survey number 18. But now listen, because it's something that nobody's ever tried to talk to humanity about directly. I can look back at my nervous system and history books, and I can see glimpses at the time of some of them trying it. But nobody had the kind of terminology we've got now because the nervous system wasn't developed to this point. So listen. First, let me look at it or present to you as a kind of, again, topographical curio question, rhetorical question, about why things seem to be limited, as always, to these two possibilities. Well, that one real fast. But then on to why humanity has been wired up in the main to be, to say the least, immured of one of these possibilities. Before you think you got lost, let me make it clear. There seems to be, in a certain area, a very important area, two possibilities. Of people to sympathize, people to, I guess in Freud and his pistol psychology calls it, to identify with, aggressors, aggression, read aggression / dominant for a second, and then the docile / submissive. All right, just follow me for a second. In those areas where it seems to have any pertinence, you can see literature, movies, the news, that all situations, history, seems to be divided up into the aggressors and those who have been aggressed. All stories, all movies, all pieces of fiction, all myths, all of your unanalyzed concepts of life into little situations, always has, now sometimes they'd be called hero and villain, but you got to do better than that. That's a very crude reflection, but if that gives you any hint of where I'm trying to get you to look. The concept in this sense is wired up into human consciousness to see everything divided up into aggressors and the docile, those being aggressed against. Why? Well, let me first make sure that you realize this. The absolute, well, I'm absolutely safe putting it this way, majority of humanity throughout the ages sympathizes with, supports, identifies with one group. Those aggressed against, the docile. Why? And nobody's ever asked this question. You've never heard it. And don't, of course, don't be crude enough, even you people out of town, to suddenly say, well, that's the way God wants it. Get out. And don't say, well, because that's the way things are. Go with the people that believe in God. Think about it a second. As always, at least I keep hinting to you, and those of you who begin to get glimpses of it, there can be seen to be a very pragmatic, an electrical, a chemical, a mathematical, an astronomical, a subatomic purpose. But it seems so right, no one has ever looked into it. Nobody's even ever asked. Why is the vast majority of humanity always been wired up? And no question, nobody thinks about it. It's never been discussed about why should we, even theoretically, why should we sympathize with this group in history or this movie based upon supposedly this epoch of history? Why do we sympathize with the poor, what is now Middle Europeans, when these uncouth, barbaric Mongols come sweeping down upon them? It's obvious who the villains are. The bad guys. The bad guys are people who are aggressive, who attempt to dominate. Oh, look at those poor little, as we would call them now, Anglos, and those poor little Saxons. There's one or two Saxons. Those poor little Germanic people. As if it's proper to feel sorry for Germanic peoples, as if they needed it. But there is no question. You don't ever think about it. The Romans are not heroes to anyone vis-a-vis the story of the crucifixion of Jesus, if there was such a thing. The Egyptians are not heroes to anyone, not the majority of humanity, vis-a-vis the plight of the poor the Israelis, the Jews. There's no question. Who was the aggressor? You look at a movie. There it is. Tony Curtis playing Attila the Hun, or John Wayne playing Marco Polo. I'm not here to just keep making jokes. Think about it. There's no question. You go in, you pay your money, you sit down to see a movie, or you turn on TV, a movie. There's no question who is the hero. And the hero is always going to be, if you take what I'm describing to you, a fair, an unused, a surprising new mapping of humanity. The heroes are always those being aggressed against. The hero never turns out to be Attila. The hero in a story, a short history of the Jews, the Old Testament, one of DeMille's, one of those great Hollywood epics, there's no question. And you don't have to be Jewish, you don't have to know anything about religion. Just a few minutes of the movie and you understand. Oh, those people they're calling the Egyptians, boy, they're going to get it before this is over. You know they are going to get it. Why? Because they are aggressive. They're attempting to dominate this other group. Why? Why is it you've never even noticed that? Of course, there's another why, if you want to go this far, is why have you never noticed that you were wired up to be that way? Now, if you were a question on this, if I'd slipped up on it, if you were ordinary people, and I slipped up on this, and you had said, well, there could be something to this, your story then would have been, well, it's cultural. I'm Jewish. I brought up, I know something. I've read a little of the Old Testament. I'm not that religious. But we had good reason to feel that way about the Egyptians. Or a man who said, well, I was Greek. My family was Greek, and we traced back some of the stories are some of my family was some of the first Christians. And look what the Romans did. Sure, I feel that way. But you would call it a cultural phenomenon, a racial phenomenon. You would believe that it is something that I have acquired. From where, God knows. But it's something I acquired outside the electrical currents that are man. Suffice it to say that I was going, or suffice it for me to say, and suffice it that you should be able to feel it, that it is natural, you just never looked at it. That there is no doubt you don't ever have to sit there with a book, even one that seems to be a little more abstract than Charlton Heston leading the run from Pharaoh. You pick up a book like Don Quixote, and you recognize the hero because he's the guy being put upon. In this case, he seems to be put upon by society in general. The folly of man. There are heroes and there are villains. And the hero is always the person being aggressed against. Why? Why have you never noticed it? Now, assuming that those of you still hanging around this, even in other places getting the tape, you've got to be beyond some level of the idea that the guides, that something outside this system has set things up exactly the way that he or she wants it done. And that's what all this is about. You've got to see for a second, said he hopefully, if not rhetorically. For a second, you've got to see that there is no reason that the majority of humanity, including you, could not have been wired up to take the aggressors in all stories and in all instances out in life, the aggressors as being the heroes. Think about this thing. There is no reason, there is no physical, and by that I mean molecular, any law of physics known, there is no reason it could not have been that way. Now, at least any of you with very crude and childish voices in you that still think that I'm trying to push you in some moral or immoral direction, if you can hear this right quick. What I'm asking you, the question of why is it that humanity could not in the main been wired up to find what you would normally call the aggressors as being the heroes. That does happen in limited areas. It's just not the majority. It's not this impossible. There are little pockets. I'm speaking time and space-wise for you still of 3D consciousness. That is historically and even presently. There are little pockets. It pops up all the time. It's not all that unusual. But you don't see it in that particular way. That is, that there are little pockets, that is, parts of life's body, the energy of life coming out through certain little areas in humans that find the aggressors, what the majority would call the aggressors, to find them to be the heroes. So you can't say that it's unknown. From the majority view, it seems to be an anomaly. And they normally are driven to condemn it. That, my God, how far the mainstream of human decency could be this group of people. They supported him. They still find this group or that individual, they've got pictures of him. They teach their children historically that these events, insofar as their group are concerned, were admirable. I just want you to understand that it is not unknown. It is not something I simply conjured up. But how curious that you've never seen, that no one can see, and I'm saying that, of course, rhetorically, that it could have easily been the other way. There's no way that you can sit there and tell me right now that there is some reason that comes to your mind, absolute, just that you can really defend it, or it's so good you wouldn't have to defend it, of why it is that humanity, the majority, is already wired up to support, to sympathize, to identify with those being aggressed against. Might I also note for you, history remembers only the aggressors. As our buddy from out of town once pointed out, that given enough 3D time, the vilest of tyrants will eventually become a historical hero. Now you got to take that on the full level. If he's just a little petty, vile tyrant, like all he did was kick his wife around, history's not going to remember him. He's got to have kicked around thousands of people, maybe a whole country, and been vile about it. Been the epitome of slobbering aggression. So he's got to have been that big that, in other words, at the time, the majority of the people aware of what he was doing went, boy, what an aggressive son of a bitch he is. Now, let's don't invite him over for the cookout. All you got to do is wait, give it enough time, and if he had that kind of impact, he, she, some group, all you got to do is wait long enough, and history will rehabilitate them. History, that is, larger groups at another time and place of the energy going through life will convert. They'll reach a certain group of people, and what was a vile tyrant, a despicable aggressor, will be converted into an understandable, militaristic, perhaps prone hero. That he did, or that group did, a service. They helped move along history. It never failed. But the point I wanted to point out to you is history only takes notes of. It only remembers the aggressors. But then, can you fit this in? A lot of you are nodding here that, yeah. Then notice, though, there seems to be exceptions to what I just said. Even if you hadn't had it strike you right then, because this still ain't the end of it. How about these great Buddhas? How about the Saint Francis of Assisi? How about the Jesuses? They would seem to be those put upon, right? They would seem to be those aggressed against. How did they get noticed? How did they get remembered? When I've stated that the fact is, history remembers only the aggressors. And my God, all you got to do is go, home and look at the painting I've got there on velvet of Jesus looking off in the sky. And I'd ask you, is that the painting of an aggressor? Well, given enough time, I've already pointed out that the vilest of aggressors get turned into heroes. Now, if that's true, all electrical currents that we know in the 3D world are the kind we use, the kind I'm referring to, are alternating. That you've got a ground that is a minus and you've got a negative and a positive charge. So if aggressors can be turned into heroes, would you believe it could not work the other way? Now, I said that there was no way that you could offer any proof as to why life has been wired up for the majority of humanity. It's not us, it's not this part of the world, it's not our culture, it's not our race, it's not your race, it's not your culture. It's simply the majority of humanity, for the majority of the time that there's any history of humanity, have always sympathized with, found to be their heroes in any situation, historical, literary, imaginary, poetic, musical. The heroes are always, for the majority of mankind, those aggressed against. And I said that you could not tell me why. You've had 5 minutes or so. Now, I'm not going to tell you otherwise, I don't guess, but how about this? Only one or two of you one person I ever mentioned this to. Sometimes it strikes me that I'm stuck here with these one or two gestures, walking back and forth in our limited camera, that I was going to set up a keyboard to where I could go ahead and every now and then play little bits to go along with this and segue. I could do more satirical stuff that I throw in sometimes about some of the great philosophers of, the Irving Berlins, and sometimes I get a laugh out of you and sometimes I don't. So I figured that if I had a keyboard here and I even threw that in, it would probably make it worse and make you even dizzier, so I didn't do it. Just don't say I didn't ever do anything for you, because I didn't do that. That's what I did for you. What I was just talking about, believe it or not, was related to that. When I said I'm not going to tell you otherwise, but I'm going to tell you something. And that's why I suddenly imagine me knocking off a little quick riff to see if anybody begins to understand that this is a kind of almost exception to thinking about action, feeling of action, or actually acting. It's like jazzing of action. It's like jazzing of thinking. It's like jazzing of feeling. But here's what I was going to tell you, sans that. Before I tell you that, how about a quick one? What have I got down to now? 3 gestures? That the physical sciences in the 3D world believe, without any doubt now, seems to be the accepted fact, that there is an inverse universe simultaneously. That is, for every molecule of matter, it has its counterpart of an anti-piece of matter. I really wasn't going into using that tonight, but I'll go ahead and throw it before I go where I was going. Me asking questions like, why is it that the majority of humanity, just so much so that it's almost a rule, identifies with the docile, with the submissive, that they are the heroes? You understand, if we're going to take the accepted idea of the physical sciences now, that means there's another universe somewhere that the opposite is true. That is not the universe that this activity is about, because both of them are lacking. I was inclined to bring that up. I'll leave it to you in case I ever come back to it. But the thing that I was going to point out, of why life has not let it range to where the aggressors are the heroes, that the aggressors are those that the average person sympathizes with, feels for. And it's not cultural, it's not acquired, it's the way it is. In our world, not the anti-world of the 3D world, but the 3D world as it is now, the 3D world as our cities are, as our city, as our land level consciousness be. As things are, could you see this possibility that aggression directly interferes with what I have tried to establish for some of you, or to all of you, and a lot of you have found favor and pregnancy with it over the last several weeks, the time lag. That aggression would seem to be a temporary but quite real destabilization of the time lag. That is, remember the time lag of me pointing out that which apparently the upper circuits can believe they're undertaking, like I'm going to quit using white sugar, quit smoking, that whatever the decision is, I'm going to quit talking so crudely to my wife, that it's an absolute 24-hour lag before, if this were pursued, before the lower circuits would have a full recognition, before they'd be fully impacted, if the upper circuits could continue this, that there is this 24-hour lag, plus the additional kicker is that the upper circuits are not wired up to hold such an idea, such a desire, such a decision. Remember where we were. Based upon that, in the 3D world as we have it now, as you would observe it, could you see that one possibility is why life, remember in this city, not the anti-city, that why life would have it that everyone in the main sympathizes with the aggressed against. As you get goddamn mad and things seem to happen just then. Even by accident. Forget what I'm about to get into is on purpose. But somebody can get mad, and apparently, in a certain way, the 24-hour lag, the lag time has been destabilized. Ordinary people just get goddamn mad enough, and it's as though that one thing has now short-circuited the necessary ordinary time lag, and it's as though almost the entire organism of that person is now functioning in one direction. Anger, aggression. The first night I brought up about the time lag, I also pointed out, if this helps any of you to see another connection, I would suggest to you, for your consideration, that part of life's continual denunciation from part of its body about alcohol and drugs in general is it too can apparently create an almost instantaneous short circuit, well, instantaneous, 2 or 3 minutes of the time lag. That is, somebody can get drunk, somebody can get stoned in a certain way, and it's as though almost that you can pull yourself together. I know what I'll do. One more drink. I've had it. I'm going home and tell her or him, this is it, baby. Hit the door. You're going to get pistol whipped, you hysterical bitch or bastard. I've had it with you. I should drink more often. It's surprising the way I can do it now. And life not only produces booze and drugs, but a large segment of life's body, as far back as your nervous system can remember, as far as history goes, a large part of life's body has also been saying, don't do that, don't do that. And of course it comes out as being religious and all sorts of things. Can you see that it too can be viewed as being a kind of temporary destabilization of the time lag? Now I want to get back to forget the apparent chemical basis of drugs and alcohol is what seems to be aggression. Why is it so forbidden? Forgetting again, going past what you should be able to do. That my mother and father's guides, my genes guides told me not to be mad. You should find that interesting. Why is it? Not only humanity, but then what seems to be the creations of humanity, the institutions, all religions, except for little things that pop up now and then, but all the major religions condemn aggression. That just seems to be the heart of them. Is don't be pissed, don't be mad. You know, our gods don't like that. And the majority of people in that given area, it just seems to strike their little hearts. They call it conscience. Well, it must be true because I don't even go to church much. I don't even pursue that religion, and yet I hear them describe how we shouldn't be aggressive, and it's like something in me immediately goes, yeah, that's true. So it must be true. Why? There is a kind of self-protection that is available only to a few people. Now, of course, referring to people involved with this, and it sounds strange. That's why I spent all tonight slipping up even to this point and putting it as non-aggressively, perhaps, as I care to. It's still going to sound pretty aggressive to many people's nervous system. But there is a kind of necessary, after a certain point, self-protection that is available through a willful, controlled form of aggression. And I mean with this kind of activity. And I mean, if I must help share and spread out the 3D questionability of this, I would suggest to you that humanity's ideas, the city ideas of these great, how about the real passive people? The Jesuses, the Buddhas. I would suggest to you that the information has been either converted to stories or that the information is so flawed to lend your ideas of these great spiritual heroes. And by spiritual, I don't mean just religious. Your ideas of people who knew something, that they could not be aggressive. Because their messages always seem to be somewhere along the line, don't be aggressive. And of course, not to put Buddha and Jesus on the level with me, I don't mean that. I didn't think anybody'd get that. But notice I keep pointing out that you cannot do this. You can't do this and be hostile. You know, and I don't allow you, well, you know all that. And so it's a fact. And yet I'm telling you now, a kind of willful and controlled aggression is a necessary form of self-preservation. Willful and controlled. It can't be accidental. It is the basis of heroics. But there is no, I can clean the name up. I'm not going to. Now that I said that, I can't even do it. I wouldn't have the stomach to do it. It is downright, from the 3D view, it is fucking aggression. And there's nothing wrong with it. Nothing, nothing, nothing. Not because I said so, but once you find out what it is. It doesn't hurt anybody. And I don't mean just physically. You don't do anybody any kind of psychic harm, psychological harm. The only people that's ever going to get on the dance floor with you, whether it be individuals or a large number of people, they're prepared to dance, or they wouldn't be on the dance floor with you. Now, for them to be surprised, and for them to be ready to step off the dance and you suddenly grab them, that's the nature of the game. That's what happens when you go to a dance. Sometimes you dance forward, sometimes you dance backwards. If you're going to protect yourself in a certain way. Now, no, I've said protect yourself and hadn't said much else, but you people just think of what you consider to be your personal problems in life, from family, lovers, just your general feelings of inadequacy, your general feelings of being put upon by life, your general feelings that I can't handle myself. It seems as though I've always been dancing backwards, and nobody seems to appreciate the fact. Maybe Tom McCann or whoever puts new heels on your shoes, they might. Well, I brought it up tonight, and I'm not sure if I'm going to take it any further. I will at least repeat it again. There is a kind of necessary protection that only an extraordinary person can do. It's not for show, and I say extraordinary not to brag on anybody that can do it, and there's no way I can prove it. It's not open to any proof. But enough of you should have enough experience now, and thinking of experience, that you should get some glimpse of this. The old ideas, not that they're wrong, they're just incomplete. But the old idea is that if somebody was more intelligent, if somebody was more conscious, if somebody was more spiritual, if somebody was so much more intelligent that understood actually how things were going on, I mean, they laid down and let everybody dance on them. It's not that that's right or wrong in any particular situation, because by and large, anybody that understood anything, you got a whole other story about where they're on the dance floor and a lot of other ways I could describe it. But when it comes to what seems to be the personal dance, that is a personal situation between you and other people, you have got to protect yourself. Now, other people do as they must. Life is through them converting energy, and the heat, the electrical energy, life's energy comes through, and it will come out in that person at various times and various ways as heat, light, motion itself, them actually making some move. That is just what happens. And sometimes they just seem to be aggressive, and sometimes they seem to be docile. Sometimes they seem to be dancing with somebody while playing the lead position, and other times they seem to be dancing backwards. They're following. That is, they're submitting. The only way that you can protect yourself once you begin to understand it is not through submission. I don't care what banner it went under. There's no way you can describe it. There's no way you can explain it. There's no way that you can justify it, because it's not true. If you're going to defend yourself, you have got to be the dominant one. If it was with your mother, your father, your husband, your wife, your lovers, your children, strangers. And I repeat one more time, you should all suspect that you'd be making a mistake to take this as being simply a physical call to arms to send you out in the street beating up on people. That's not necessary. That's necessary for those that are turning life's energy into motion with very little light involved. Lots of heat, lots of motion, no light, no understanding. That happens. It is willful, controlled aggression. It's not harmful, and it's very sweet, and it is very, very effective. It would make Japanese assembly and manufacturing attitudes and execution look like they came out of the Dark Ages. It is effectiveness itself. Before I leave it, before we stop tonight, one or two little things I'll throw in. If you doubt that at all, if you want another way to look at it this way. How does life handle you? How does life handle humanity? Now, internally, it seems to be the split up of life's energy into a partnership in you, into this ambivalence, that inside of you there seems to be a dance going on with two different people. Who's the hero? Who is it that you seem to admire in you at the ordinary level? What you admire is the one getting kicked around. What you admire is the one having to dance backwards. And in ordinary people, many times, as this was pointed out in any way, if it came to their molecular attention upstairs, many people would even take that as being a sign, well, I do have some real spiritual basis, because I sort of accept, if not enjoy, being pushed around, dancing backwards. The gods obviously chose me to do that. And according to history, that's a sure sign. The whole idea, of course, of being pushed around and being aggressive and all of that are 3D concepts. All I'm telling you, at the very most, you always got to remember this. Me standing here talking to you and on tape, the most I can ever tell you is 3/4 of what I know. What I know, not what I guess, what I see. That's the most I can tell you. But let me put it another way. That doesn't mean that all I know is 3/4 of it. And well, what I mean is that 4/4 is not necessarily all there is. So the descriptions, aggression, just a word, hostility, submission. But they are the most correct words for what I'm trying to get you to look towards, is a willful, controlled aggression. You have it under control. You turned it on. It is literally an act, and you can stop it. But there are many, many, many things I hint to you that you take as being just unanswerable personal problems. Not of thought, but of behavior. The relationships between you and other people. And if you knew what to do, it'd just be, hey, shut your goddamn mouth. That's the last time I'm going to talk to you in this manner. You got it? This is it. If you know how to do it, it's the end of the problem. The end of the problem in the 3D world. Just think if Freud had known that and had the pistol instead of a pencil and a little notepad. It goes unnoticed. I guess some of you, I'm really about to stop the tape now, the public part. As soon as I say this, I guess there'll be at least 4 or 5 of you in here who go, ah. The whole thing about aggression that I'm pointing out to you, and I said protection, it's not just that. I'm just saying eventually you'll learn how to use it, and you'll see that you've got to use it, and it's proper to use it, and it's not questionable, it's not debatable, and then you'll understand that aggression was just a word. The aggression being necessary, a certain kind of willful, controlled aggression. As strange as it may have sounded tonight to some of you, are you going to tell me right now when I finish the public end of this tape that once I say it, that you're not aware of the fact that I do it to you? I do it to you every night that I stand up here? And if I did not do it, nothing would have happened yet. Nothing. And eventually, if you don't know how, not just use it on your wife or your husband, if you don't know how to use it on you, as you goddamn dumb motherfucker, if you don't know how to do it, then you'll never be able to do to you what I've done to you. It is willful, it is controlled, and I am not misspeaking as far as words go. It is aggression. But it's not mechanical. It's not out of control. And you don't have to explain it to you or anybody, which is the difference between something being just mechanical and it being willful. But many of you have not only been up close to this, some of you have been past the point, and I just never got around to doing it. That what was lacking, the kind of thing that you looked at me for, that you either asked me or you looked at me with your eyes about, there's got to be something else I could do. And sometimes I gave little tricks, and I'd say, well, consider this. What would have really, at the 3D level, with the other people involved, or the other person involved, would have been willful, controlled aggression. Immediate. That if we're going to dance, unless I'm going to die, I'm leading this dance. We may only dance one more step. Then the dance may be within 10 seconds. But this dance is going to stop with me dancing forward. When I die, I'm going to be dancing forward. Of course, you can't say that death is finally going to lead. But it's going to be right when I go, that'll be its one step. If that made death happy, then it can say, well, he danced backwards for a second. Ha ha, he went, but that's it. Between here and there, fuck it. By and large in life, I hadn't stopped yet, have I? You do notice that by and large, and especially some of you, at least any of you think, especially people that may be fairly new to seeing this, the more you begin to understand, the less there seems to be a need for this. That is, the less there seems to be these great soap opera peaks and valleys in your life, that's just happened. The less does your family, your ex-wives, your ex-husbands, strangers, less does life itself seem to be your enemy. And yet still, I'm telling you that there is a reason for this, or I would not have brought it up. And even run the risk of it sounding as harsh as it will strike some people in the beginning. There is a reality behind my description of willful, controlled aggression that is at times an absolute necessary manifestation of life's own energy if you're going to continue this, or else you're going to become a short circuit in regard to this. You'll simply go back to doing what you've always done. You'll go back to being aggressed against, which is neither here nor there. It's just the way you were. It's the way the majority, I'm trying to get you, of life feels. That's why the majority of life finds their heroes to be those that have been trodden upon. The downtrodden. The trodders, boo on them. They'll get theirs. This movie will be over in 10 minutes. I don't see how you're going to get out of it, but you know the trodders are going to get it. I'd advise you not to forget it. Into the public tape. Okay, quick. When I got 4 minutes. Did you flash down to? Well, we don't even have time for. I was going to give you a piece of an excursion. All right, I will, right quick. Listen, I want you to take in the next 3 days, I want you to take something in your life that seems to be a normal flow of energy that comes through you. You're going to have to figure this out yourself right quick. Something comes through you, this kind of feeling, something you have toward life, a certain kind of attitude, something you think about a lot, something that you believe that you have a strong feeling about in some area. And I want you to willfully try and take that energy and in 3 separate manners, and you find a way just that nobody else has to see it. You can do it by yourself out walking, out jogging. You can do it sitting at home. It's to turn that energy willfully, try and direct it and turn it into light, thinking of motion, thinking of action, then try and turn it into heat of a feeling about possible motion, and then thirdly, and of course one of these were going to be what you've already been doing by and large anyway, but then to turn it willfully into motion of some kind. If it's nothing but get up and put your fist against the wall, or to stand up and say, yes, 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 I'll come out and march with you people. Find your own way. We're running out of time.